Today we're gonna make some birria tacos. So let's get right into these birria tacos. This is something I've been wanting to do for like 2 years now on camera. I've had a lot of people ask me to do it, but I was a little bit intimidated. It's a longer cooking process and it uses some ingredients that I'm not quite as familiar with. But if you look at the principles of how we're cooking this, it's pretty simple. Just takes a few new techniques that I wasn't as comfortable with. So I've studied them, I know how to do it now, and I wanna show y'all how I make this. So the base of the flavors are gonna come from these dried chilies. We've got some guajillo chilies and some ancho chilies. There's certainly some other dried chilies you'll see in different recipes. This is what I could get my hands on. I don't have a ton of these Mexican ingredients available to me that easily. So you might see some other recipes that uses a few more chilies, and that's great. But the base, you know, you really wanna have these guajillos. I think that's where the main flavor comes from. Now, this can be a little bit spicier if you want to. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna pull these stems off, and I'm gonna actually take the seeds, open it up like that. I'm gonna take the seeds and dump it right out. If you want it to be hotter, keep that in there. That's definitely gonna give it more spice, but I don't want it to be too hot. I do want a lot of these peppers so we can get all that flavor, but I don't want it to be too spicy. Now we've got a big stock pot here with about 8 or 10 cups of water, give or take. We're bringing this up to some low heat. We're gonna let this start to simmer, but as soon as we get these chilies where we like them, we're gonna go ahead and throw them right in, and we're gonna let it submerge there, and we're gonna bring it up to a soft boil. Now we're gonna do the same thing for these ancho chilies. These aren't gonna have as much heat in them, but they are gonna give it that really smoky, earthy flavor that you love. All right, be sure to get these submerged. Kind of poke them down here so they're covered in water. And basically we're rehydrating these peppers. So we're gonna get it up to a soft boil to cut the heat off and let that sit for 5 or 10 minutes so that it rehydrates these peppers and they're gonna be good to go. So this is starting to bubble up a little bit. We're almost up to a boil. We're gonna take this tomato, I've got 1 Roma tomato, cut the stem off of it. We're gonna put it in there for about a minute, maybe 2, and then we're gonna pull that out, cut the heat off, and let this sit for another 5 minutes so those chilies can finish rehydrating. Then we're gonna put everything into a blender. All right, let's pull that tomato off of here. That skin should peel off now. Let's cut the heat and let these chilies rest for about 5 more minutes, and we'll get everything in the blender here. So we're gonna put everything in here. We've got our tomato. I've got several cloves of garlic here, probably 6 or 8. A few bay leaves. Now we've got some white onion here, going right in with it. Now I'm gonna add some crove fajita rub. Typically you're gonna see some oregano, some cumin, some salt, pepper, things like that. And I've got all of that in this fajita rub. So we're gonna add some of that in here. So we've had plenty of time, so let's take these peppers and we're gonna also add some of this water. That water's gonna have a ton of flavor. That's gonna go into this mixture here. So I'm gonna go straight in. So now I want to add some acidity. I've seen a lot of people just use regular vinegar. I'm gonna add some lime juice here. Now let's get the lid on this and let's blend it up. Now in this pot here, I've drained the water out. I'm gonna add some oil, about a cup, a little more than a cup maybe. And we're gonna throw this right in. We're gonna let this start simmering for about 15 minutes here. That sauce has just the brightest, most beautiful red color, and it smells so good. Okay, so we have this simmering. This is looking amazing. That color and that smell is so good. Now let's talk about the meat here. We've got some chuck roast. Now, traditionally, this recipe uses goat, actually. You can use some beef shank. You can use, I've seen a lot of people use like a top round. Anything that you can roast like this is gonna be great for this recipe. I'm using chuck roast, but you can use brisket, anything like that. It's gonna work well for this. So what we're looking to do is to cut it into little pieces. We're looking for about 2 inches by 2 inches, give or take, because we're gonna shred this by the time it's done, but you want it to cook little blocks about this big, give or take. And you don't want too much fat for this. So if you have big chunks that probably aren't gonna render down, we'll just cut those off. A little fat's fine. A little fat's kind of what we're looking for here, but nothing, not too much, especially that hard fat. So cut this up We're gonna hit each side with a little salt and pepper. Now, typically in recipes like this, it feels like you'd sear it. And I see a lot of recipes where you do. You're gonna sear the meat before you add it into the braising liquid. That feels more traditional to me. Most recipes don't call for that, that I've seen, and I don't think it's necessary here, so we're seasoning this up. We're gonna give it a few minutes to let this finish coming together, and then we're gonna add it right to that. All right, you can see the color here is just magnificent. Now, this is ready for us. We're gonna add our beef into it. And of course, you're gonna see this isn't all gonna be covered, so we're gonna add some water, and that's gonna really help it cover everything up. And this is gonna simmer for about 3 to 4 hours. You can go even longer than that, but what we're looking to do is just to get this really tender so that we can shred it. So I'm gonna add a little bit of water here. Now let's give this a good mix. All right, so this has come up to a rolling boil. Now we're gonna turn it down to a low heat, give this a good mix. And again, this is gonna go for like 3 hours or so. So just stir it every now and then, leave the lid on it, you're good to go. All right, so it's been about 4 hours now. I'll let this go a little bit longer than I kind of originally said, but this beef is so tender. It's kind of falling apart already as we get ready to pull this out. The smell is amazing, as you could probably imagine after braising for so long. But the next step, we're just gonna take all these chunks of beef, and I like to go ahead and put it right into a bowl. Now I'm gonna grab a non-stick skillet. I'm gonna go ahead and start heating it over some medium heat. Let that come up to temperature. Now, it's not necessary to go in and actually cut this because it's so incredibly tender, but if you didn't simmer it for 4 or 5 hours like I did, you may have to go in and just give it a rough chop. And then just kind of add it back to your bowl here. Now, if you're using a chuck roast like I am, keep an eye out. If you have any big bands of fat, you can pull that out. I tried to get rid of anything that was too big earlier, but you might have something like this has a little bit here, right here on the end, and it's mostly rendered out. But if you have a little piece of fat, don't be afraid to just kind of set that aside as you're going through and shredding all this. Now we've got this all shredded. I am going to take a little spoonful of this consomme and just reincorporate it into this beef. The way it stays nice and moist. I'm also going to take just a little bit of lime juice to this finished product here. Now the next step is I'm gonna go ahead and shred some cheese so it's ready to go when we make these tacos. Now I am all for some Oaxaca cheese. That's the best cheese for this. It's hard for me to find it here in Paris, Tennessee. It's just not something that I've found in a grocery store. So I've used some Monterey Jack, or I've used this right here, which is some white American, and I'll usually freeze it for about 5 to 10 minutes before I go to shredding it. That way it holds its shape a little bit better. But I'm gonna grate up a bunch of that. Now our cheese is ready. Now before I started this, I cut up a bunch of white onion, really finely diced it, and I chopped up some cilantro here. We're gonna set that aside so we've got all our ingredients ready. You could also have a salsa ready, anything like that, but whatever you're gonna put into this taco, have it ready because this doesn't take too long. Now I've got this over some medium-high heat. So I've got some yellow corn tortillas here. I'm gonna take it and I'm gonna dunk it in that liquid right there. We're going right on top of that skillet. Now we're gonna kind of build our taco out mostly over about half of it. Spread that cheese out. Going in with our beef here. And one of my favorite parts of this entire dish is that we have that crispy, crunchy texture from the corn tortilla whenever it's done this way. Now just fold it over and set it aside. I'm going in with the next one. And we're gonna keep repeating that process for as many as we want to cook. Obviously, if you have a griddle or something like that, it's gonna be a little bit easier to do a lot at once, but with this size skillet, I can comfortably fit 3 in there. Now we're gonna let these cook for just a minute or so. After a minute, we're gonna carefully give it a flip. Now while these tortillas are crisping up, let's talk about this consomme. This is one of the best parts about this dish, and it's what's so eye-catching about it. So we're gonna take this consomme that's been, that braising liquid, and we're gonna put it into a little ramekin like this. I like to top it with a bunch of cilantro, some white onion. And now whenever we get these tacos, we're gonna dunk them in that consomme and just build up that flavor, and it's so good. All right, let's go in for a bite here. Gotta dip it in that consomme. Mmm. I don't even know what to say. This is like one of my favorite things to eat, hands down. This is so good. It's hard to explain the flavors here. But man, I love this so much. Even if you don't make my recipe, go somewhere that has this. Try this if you haven't. It is so good. Of course, you can find the full recipe at crowfood.com, along with our merch, our rubs, and everything else, dozens of other great recipes. As always, thanks for watching.